moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving Iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Chip Nellinger. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by dawsontire and Will, your premier ag tire and wheel provider in North America, helping people grow. TractorZoom delivering insights and dryshod boots, the official work boot of the Moving Iron Podcast. Chip is with Blue Reef Agri-Marketing out of Morton, Illinois, and he is gracious enough to be on the podcast once a week to talk about what's going on in the markets. And just like usual, Chip, we don't have anything, no lack of things to talk about here. For about the past 3 weeks, the markets in general just have been on a tear. Corn has been just going through the roof. Same with soybeans. The livestock markets have seen their share of pretty upward movements, and they've got some selling back in. But for the most part, there's a lot of action out there on the market right now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's really a sight to behold, especially in the corn market, where it's not just the futures every day, but it's cash basis levels improving along with it. And, the crazy thing is this is a big crop. Now, in fact, we're getting an update here in about 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, on the November crop report. Get an update on yields. Maybe they're coming down a little bit, but it's still a big corn crop, one of the biggest, one or two size corn crops we've ever raised, and we just rallied right through harvest, and just seems like we're in that cycle now where every little bit of news that comes out's friendly. It seems like for 3+ years it was the other way. Every time any news came out, it was negative, and right now it's all positive. We definitely have the wind at our backs. Tremendous rally that we've seen here across all our corn, beans, and wheat. I think wheat's at a 4+ year high, corn's at a couple-year high. Obviously, beans are up here, knocking on the door of $11. Haven't seen that level for a long, long time. And demand is there. And, world weather has been a little bit of an issue. Some hot spots popping up for wheat with Russia, and then out your way in the southern plains. There's been a lot of dry weather. That might be turning a little bit for the better for the plains. Russia's still dry. Brazil has been super dry, but that's starting to turn a little bit for the better for those producers as well in the southern hemisphere. So we got a lot going on. You got the election coming up here in, essentially, 8 days now.
Yeah.
So that could have a great effect on our financial markets and, possibly spill over to our agricultural markets, grain and livestock both. So there is a lot of stuff going on right now from a demand perspective and a world weather perspective. And throw in there the election and then also a crop report coming up here in a couple of weeks as well. That throw that into the stew of prices, and it's been an incredible run that we've seen here in our markets.
Absolutely. So let's talk about South America for a little while, because that is we're in that time frame where they're going into planting season, and they've got their harvest coming up here in January, February time frame, and what that looks like, and that's kind of the catalyst out there right now for as far as corn and beans are concerned. Talk about South America right now and kind of some of the stuff you see happening there that, I guess I know they've gotten some very timely rains like you just talked about. I guess from your perspective as you look there right now, I mean, it's awful early to make big overwhelming speculations here, but I guess what are your thoughts about South America right now?
Yeah, I think that it remains to be seen. I think that's something that is really going to cause a lot of volatility in our prices here over the next 70 days or so, give or take, say between now and February when that harvest starts. So a couple things that it is looking like La Nina is going to continue down there, and maybe here as well. That trends them towards a warmer, drier weather. They've already started to see that. Their planting pace is probably about 2 to 3 weeks delayed. And so then that brings into question, okay, there's the second crop of corn that they raise after they harvest beans is a big crop. Will that be delayed as well? And will that be affected because they're getting a slow start to their first crop of bean planting here? And they are set. They have record prices down there. The producers are set to plant a tremendous amount of acres, 2 to 3% more acres down there. So if Mother Nature cooperates and they get the moisture they need, they could have a massive crop and maybe stop the demand that we're seeing dead in its tracks as it shifts down there in January, February, really January through about, April, May timeframe is when they would take over and be the, supplier, the cheapest supplier in the world of beans and possibly even corn in some instances. So how big is their crop size is really gonna drive us here. They're getting a little shaky start, but it is starting to turn for the better. And they're not as dry. They've caught some timely rains. Their planting pace is picking up. And so I think it all goes towards what is their growing season weather, how big of a crop are they going to produce. And they're on tap if, there's been some private estimates from down there of possibly, 130 to 135 million metric ton bean crop. That would be just massive. That would be something to the tune of a couple 100 million bushels greater than they've ever raised down there. That would be bigger than our bean crop by a long shot. And so will they achieve that or not is going to probably, give the answer to whether beans have to go to $11.50 or $12 plus, or if we're near the top and they're going to take $1.50 out of them because South America is going to have a massive supply of them here in about 90 days. So Mother Nature is going to have the final say in that here, but that will really cause a lot of potential volatility in our prices here, depending on how their growing season plays out.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk about the hog market for a minute. So looking at the hog market, and China is rapidly reproducing their hog herd as fast as they can. And there's some estimates and some analysts that are saying that the Chinese we've peaked. They've kind of peaked where their buying is going to be at, and then you can start seeing some level of of taper, off of that number as they move forward into the export realm. What are your thoughts about the hog market right now, and what are your thoughts about that idea that we've kind of peaked demand with China right now?
Well, I don't know if you've seen that just yet. I think that's their goal is to rebuild their hog herd and become more self-sufficient. I think as it's laid out here and proven out, I think that for a lot of reasons, the flooding that they've seen there this past summer, I think that their crop size probably ended up. They had some dry pockets. They had a lot of insect pressure. I don't think they had a very good crop. I think they need our products, and I think it is just happened to line up with this trade agreement because I think with or without the trade agreement, they would have been buying a large amount of our products because they need them right now. The trade agreement just came at the right time for them and helped them out.
Right.
But that is their goal. They do not want food inflation. You're seeing basically record corn prices there. I believe it's somewhere north of $8, close to $9 per bushel domestically in China. And they've taken a huge amount of our pork on a weekly basis, massive amounts of U.S. pork we've sold to China in the interim as they try to rebuild that hog herd. That's part of the emphasis behind this massive bean buying is, because as they rebuild the hog herd, it takes a large amount of meal. And so they're ramping up, and their crush facilities are crushing for the meal. So I think it's probably not a quick solution there. I think that's probably the path they're headed. They want that domestically. They'd be silly not to, because they don't want food inflation in a communist country. That's the very first thing that gets a revolution type issue started, or a transfer of the old government to a new government, and that's not what they want. They want to keep their people fed and have plenty of food, and so it's good for us right now. But yeah, absolutely, at some point there will be a peak in this, and we probably won't know till after the fact. But some of that's going to be determined, about February timeframe, give or take a couple weeks on either side. If they continue to just keep buying from us as they shift that demand to South America, that's something that could be really beneficial to our prices. If they just turn the lights off on us and everything is going to be bought from the Southern Hemisphere again, that's likely going to cause, a dip in our prices, and, as they take over from us and become a cheaper source. So it's been a pretty straight up rally. I don't expect that to continue. There's going to be, it doesn't mean we're not going to end up higher than where we're at, but we haven't had a real healthy correction in this thing yet, in any of our grain prices here. I mean, wheat, you could argue we have, but corn and beans have been pretty straight up, and eventually you're going to have some really stomach churning volatility, I'm afraid, in corn and beans before it's said and done, because of all these issues, right? Mm-hmm. Is China going to keep buying? What's the crop size in South America and Brazil? How's their weather? What's Russian weather and wheat production going to be like coming into this spring? A lot of these questions are going to cause a lot of volatility in prices, I think, between now and next spring.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about wheat for a minute. Wheat is had some very strong runs up, and there's a lot of pressure on wheat as far as from a planting perspective, just because of what we're seeing happening with drought in Russia and Ukraine and in the Black Sea areas, as well as like Kansas and Oklahoma. There's just not much moisture that guys planted into, and some guys are still planting their crop because they're just not getting the moisture that they need. So I guess as you take a look at wheat, feels like there could be some pretty good upward mobility, especially as we go through winter and start talking about winter kill and those kind of things.
Yeah, and we've already had a tremendous rally in wheat prices, and the funds are long, somewhere just north of 50,000 contracts of wheat. That means they've likely could add to that pretty easily. Yes, the for the first time in many years, we're into a situation where world wheat stocks are shrinking instead of growing, and demand is strong. And Russia is such a huge player in this, and that's a big unknown, because the world is waiting for word on what is Russia going to do. How much are they going to export of the crop that they just harvested this summer? How much are they going to use internally? Again, kind of talked about food security from a Chinese perspective. That's very high on the priority with Russia as well. They don't want their domestic wheat and flour prices to go shooting through the roof and pinch their citizens there. And so they're very aggressive about clamping down on exports if they need that wheat internally. And so it's a little bit of a mystery right now what they're going to do in the world markets. Right now they've been pretty quiet, and that's given us and some other countries an upper hand in doing some business we probably wouldn't have. So that wheat crop that's being planted or trying to be planted right now is very, very dry in Russia, as it has been, in our central and southern plains. They're not getting a whole lot of rain. They've had a couple little showers, but it's pretty dry there. And so if that continues on in, through the winter and into next spring, that won't bode well for their crop, and that could really get us fired up. But yeah, I think the stage is set there if we continue to see problems either in the plains, or I think probably even more importantly would be that Russian crop. If they continue to stay on the dry side, or they don't end up exporting as much as what is projected, then you could easily see wheat prices in the world, and then by default, our prices here follow along to the upside, but it may not be an easy ride. If we do go higher, there's probably going to be, again, a lot of back and forth, give and take. The wheat market is a vicious market to begin with, and puts moves in that boggle your mind and make your head spin around wondering what just happened. So we haven't seen a lot of those fun and games yet. So we're probably going to see that in the very near future, where you wake up someday, you're like, why are we 40 cents off the highs from 2 days ago? And then 5 days later, you're like, wow, we just sure gained that back in a hurry. We're in new highs. Right. That's kind of how the wheat market trades historically.
Yeah. All right. So another thing I've been paying attention to, I've seen several climatologists from, like University of Nebraska and areas like, and just a few other areas, schools like that in the Corn Belt that have been talking about, drought monitors, and they've been following things. And I believe the climatologist from the University of Nebraska, and I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she made a statement as far as, paraphrasing here, but basically if Nebraska gets the normal amount of winter moisture that they would get in a given year, they're still going to be behind when planting season begins in the spring. And I would say that's, kind of across the board there. If you look into Iowa and Illinois, there's a similar pattern there where there's a drought lingering, and it seems to be growing at the same time. So I guess as you talk to the guys you work with and some other traders and those kind of things out there, what's the sentiment as far as sentiment for the overall kind of impact of what a drought might look like going into spring?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some hot spots, like you said. Iowa is going to need more rain. They're really on the low side and have been all summer. It's a little early, still in October, right, to be worried about that, but it's certainly set up to where if we don't get much moisture or snowfall in those March, April rains that everyone kind of counts on, that we could be coming in on the dry side. But there's a lot of time to fix that. Case in point, we have been super dry here in central Illinois as well, in areas. Had very little rain in the month of August. Not a lot the last week or 10 days of July. Some areas then had 6 to 7 inches of rain in the first part of September. Never had much since then, but last week we got recharged with 3 to 4 inches of rain here, so it can happen quickly. But there are certainly a lot of world hotspots. Australia's been very dry for the better part of 2 years now, 18 months anyway. Mm-hmm. The Russian dryness. Argentina and Brazil have been on the dry side. That Interstate 80 and north area have been really, really dry this late summer and fall. So that's going to be very closely watched. We're coming into some, times here where world stocks are shrinking, demand's very good, and so that puts the bar even higher, that we got to bounce back and raise big crops to fulfill the demand. So the markets are going to be highly, highly aware of each forecast that comes out in the major grain producing areas of the world over the next 6 to 9 months for sure.
Yep. There's I'd look at that drought map, and the areas that are some key growing areas are either in a drought or it's a developing drought. Very few places that are in good shape right now, headed into a typical time of the year where the moisture isn't necessarily the biggest thing that we get, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, it's very definitely a wait and see approach. The most urgent thing, or the thing that's going to be here front and center, is Brazil and Argentina. Over the next 75 days, how much more rain do they get? Are there any hot pockets there that get hot and miss rain? So that will be the very first thing that the market grapples with, is the South American growing season that's we're just starting into.
Yep. Yeah, I just pulled up the world drought map and didn't know if such a thing existed until I Googled it. But there's a lot of places around the globe that are in a significant drought situation. So it'd be interesting to see how this shakes out going through the winter months, especially if we go into planning into a drought. That's another big scare. But like you said, there's a lot can happen between now and April. So yeah,
that's always a double-edged sword in the spring. You know, you kind of want it on the dry side. Right. You know, get in early, get into the ground, but the moisture then has to come. So It's always that fine line that we're juggling. You know, that time of year.
Yep. What's that saying? Plant in the dirt. Something about
plant in the dust, your bins will bust.
That's it. There you go. Yeah. So
as long as it keeps raining after you plant.
that's the one part of the saying that they leave out is the rain's got to come after that. So
and I think there is a lot of truth to that. Mm-hmm. That was part, and that's going to be the end result as we kind of digest what or rehash how this growing season went. These producers in the northern, say, third of the Corn Belt is generally that Interstate 80 and north. It was a pretty wet, cold spring, and that really hurt population. So I think if you asked most producers after the last few years, they would gladly go for a dry spring to get the crop in the ground and get it, then get some moisture to get it up and going, because then you get a nice, even stand, and we had some population problems out there that probably took, very certainly the top end off of a lot of areas here on top of the dry weather in August. So the dry weather in the spring initially could be seen as bearish, but it's all up to then if it's going to keep raining through the growing season or not.
Yep, exactly. Well, Chip, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you and get some more information about what it is Blue Reef can do for them. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way is just give us a call at the office. It's 309-550-7213. That's our main office in Morton. It also rings over to our cell phone if we happen to be out of the office or traveling. And then, you can always check out our website. It has a lot of information on what we do and how we do it and some of the philosophy and background of what we do. That's www.bluereef, R as in Robert, EEF as in Frank, INC.com.
Right on, man. Well, I am Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you're going to find the latest episodes as they come out of the Moving Iron Podcast. Also, check out movingironllc.com for all the latest information about the Moving Iron Summit in Nashville, Tennessee, January 20 through the 22nd. You can get all the information there, speakers and those kind of things will all be there, as well as how to register and book rooms for that event. Also, check out the Global Ag Network and the great podcasters over there, like the folks at the Dryland Farmer Podcast. Brent and Landon will make you guys laugh while you're in the tractor, in the combine, or just driving down the road, either way. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Chip Nellinger. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here.